Hi, I'm James Gangle and welcome to My Little Kitchen. It's 3:14 a.m. on March 14th, or International Pi Day, the day in which we celebrate both pi, the ratio of the circumference of any circle to the diameter of that same circle, or approximately 3.14, and pie, that sweet or savory crusted delight that increases the diameter of my circumference if I don't eat it in moderation. Today, I'm honoring both pie and pie by making pie, a sweet and succulent blueberry pie made from scratch. As a bonus in this episode, I'm also honoring homophones. So help me get over this morning for the sleep I lost, getting up so early, and instead help me celebrate this morning I have by making a blueberry pie. Come on. Alright, so the first thing we're going to work on is the pie dough, which will form the crust. And if you have a food processor, this is going to be super quick for you. But if you don't, you're going to have tons of time to talk about homophones. So we're just going to start with 2 cups of flour, a tablespoon of coarse salt. If you're using regular table salt, that's 2 tablespoons. And then we're just going to mix this together. So if you have a food processor, give it, 5 or 6 quick pulses. And next thing goes in our butter. So this is chilled butter. It's very important that you chill your butter first. Pie crust is all about doing it cold. Cold, cold, cold. So this is 1 cup of butter and 6 tablespoons cut up into, half-inch pieces, bits. And I should mention that the butter is unsalted. If you have a food processor, just give it like 25 or 30 pulses, but I'm going to do it with my hands. Now I have time to talk about homophones. So if you haven't stopped to look it up, don't. I'll tell you what that is. Homophones are words that sound the same, but are spelt differently. They have different meanings, like hair and hair, bear and bear. Oh, you know what I'm needing? A processor. And you know what I'm needing? This. Okay, this is looking nice and crumbly, so that's the texture you want. And now what we're going to do is add 6 tablespoons of buttermilk, and we're going to kind of work the buttermilk into the dough. And what we're just going to form is sort of like a sticky cantaloupe-sized ball. It should feel like plasticine. So, check that out. Yeah, I guess it's closer to a softball than a cantaloupe. We're going to flour our surface just a tad, and we're going to press this into a disc, flatten it out. That's for my American viewers. In the US, they really think we do say oot, but I haven't really heard many Canadians say oot. Okay, so we have flattened oot our disc. And I have a Ziploc bag prepared here because guess what? We're going to bag it and forgag it. We're going to bag it and chill it in the freezer for at least 30 minutes. You really want to work with chilled dough. Our dough is chilling. It's time to work on our filling. What we're going to do for the filling is 6 cups of blueberries. I like to use the fresh blueberries. I think frozen blueberries, they release a lot of water. You're going to get a soupier pie. So here are our blueberries. A tablespoon of freshly squeezed lemon juice. 2/3 of a cup of granulated sugar. A 1/4 cup of cornstarch. A half teaspoon, just a little hint of cinnamon. I like my pies to have a bit of a citrusy taste. We already have the lemon in there, but I love the taste of an orange rind. So what you're going to do is just take the very edge of the orange rind with a peeler off, so you don't really want much white there. And then what we're going to do is slice this into very thin strips, and then we're just going to dice these. So they're just these tiny little I think that's the technical term. There'll be tiny little bits of in our pie. Our rind is minced up into these tiny pieces. That goes in. Now we're just going to mix all this filling together. The cornstarch should form a bit of a slurry around our blurberries. They're going to turn our blueberries into blurberries. We don't really want them to look snow-covered. We want them to kind of look slush-covered. See that? That is slurry. That's slurry. Okay, so we've got a nice little blue blurry slurry. We've mixed our ingredients together. which means we can set it aside and start working on our pie crust, rolling it out. So I've divided my pie crust into two. This is going to be our bottom crust. Gently flour a surface, dust your rolling pin, in my case a wine bottle, and what you're going to do is just roll out. Keep turning that little disc of yours. You want a relatively thin crust. We want it to be like 1/4 of an inch thick, something like that. So we're getting there, and I know you're looking at this, you're like, oh, this looks like the continent of Pangaea, not a beautiful pie crust circle, but it doesn't have to be. Just have to be thin. Let's see how this, oh yeah, see that? Nice and light and thin. So I take that back. It's not 1/4 of an inch. I think it's more of 1/8 of an inch. So now we're ready to put this in the bottom of our pie pan. It's smooth at the bottom and you can feel that there's contact there. There's no air at the edges. We're ready to fill this bad boy up. Look, if there's any liquid at the bottom of your slurry, don't put that in. Okay, this is full of berries. Before we work on the top, what I'm going to do is just dot the top with butter. A tablespoon and a half of butter bits. Now I'm going to toss this in the fridge and we'll work on the top lattice. So we've got our second piece of dough. Same thing, flour your board and start rolling this thing out. My role right now is to roll. Homophone! Looks like we got a real thin piece of pie crust here. I'm going to bring my cutting board out because I'm going to do some cutting. Okay, there are pie strips, and I'm going to confess to you guys, never done this before. And I think I just weave these babies. Now I'm very unclear on how I transfer this weave to the top of the pie, but we're going to learn this together, friends. Yeah, that's a nightmare. All right, I'm going to redo this. Okay, we've got all our strips ready for our lattice, and now we're just going to weave them on top of the pie. So now we've successfully latticed our pie. I'm just going to go ahead and trim the edges here. Trim, trim, trim. Trim, trim. Now we want to seal all these lattice pieces into our crust. So we're just going to kind of fold over any little excess crust you have and sort of pinch on that lattice structure. All right, and I'm going to try to make this crust edge look just a little bit prettier. I think they call it crimping with a fork. So just press your fork around their edges. Now we're going to just use this egg wash, which is just a beaten egg and about a tablespoon of that buttermilk I had. Coat your lattice structure, coat your crust with this little egg wash. Okay, we've got some turbinado sugar, which is basically just coarse sugar. And we're going to sprinkle some on our edges, and we're going to sprinkle some on our lattice structure. So we'll have this nice kind of crusty, sweet, delicious crust, baby, crust. Okay, our pie is done. I'm going to slip it in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. At the 20-minute mark, I'm going to cover it with some foil and drop the temperature to 350 for an additional 20 to 25 minutes. Now, I put this crust cover on at the 20-minute mark, so we're going to see if this looks like a good pie together. It's going to be a big reveal. I hope it's not a GD disaster. Let's check it out. That is a good-looking pie! Now, I want to dig into this thing right now, immediately, but I am going to resist the temptation. You really want to let your pie sit for at least 3 hours to set up, to thicken up. Better if you let it sit overnight. So, I'm going to take a quick 3-hour nap, and we'll be back to try this out. Time! Oh dear. That's the time. 3-hour mark has been reached, and so it is time to try our pie. Look at this. Look at these big berries. Look how crusty. Hear that? Crusty and delicious that crust is. And there's nothing left to do but to try this. Oh my goodness. This is so good. You can get the cinnamon and these big juicy, look at these big juicy blueberries. That bit of orange. This thing is delicious. Go and make this, and happy International Pie Day, everyone. And I hope you learned a little bit about homophones.
Homophone!